Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Welcome back to the Think Small podcast. I'm very excited for today's conversation. It's the 100th episode. And, little did I think a year ago that I think we would ever get to this point. But on the call is all of the subject experts, Monica Dema, Rob, and Denise from Chief Outsiders. But thank you all so much for hashing some time and being part of the podcast and the growth and everywhere we've kind of come from, and it's very exciting. So thank you all.
Of course.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So just drawing out, our conversation today, I know Monica is going to kind of take the wheel here. But like I said, this started about a year ago. I was having a cigar and with a colleague of mine, and he was like, Alex, you kind of talk the language of small businesses. Why don't you start a podcast? And we did it together. And on the back end, at first it was kind of like, I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm so glad that you all were brought in on this, because half the time, I was speaking with business owners, and I've spent, 10 years in a sales capacity or in a consulting capacity with small businesses. And, I didn't realize what I didn't know, I think. And some of the times I'd have a guest on and the industry would be completely new to me. And so it was like, I was way out of my depth, and to bring in other subject, experts and be able to pass along these opportunities to speak with these business owners, I think has been a real enjoyable experience.
Similar to you, Alex, I remember talking to you in that networking group about you doing this project. And I think for me, I had done something called Mission Driven Podcast, where I brought together executives from small and large businesses in the same industry to have a conversation, because I'd been having really interesting conversations with people. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I got this recorded, because I feel like this would be really beneficial to others. So I finally got that together, recorded a couple dozen episodes. And then because COVID restrictions lifted, I went outside and never wanted to look at Zoom again. And I was hesitant to come back to this platform, but there are so many interesting conversations to be had. So I couldn't not do this, right? It just felt really, really authentic. And it felt like coming home a little bit. And the people I talk to are mostly in the creative realm, whether it's a creative decorator, a creative marketing brand, companies like this. And it's exciting for me because, by the end of the conversation, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can introduce you to all these people because I want you to succeed. I want to see what that next step of growth looks like for you. Not only as a thank you for being on the podcast, but because the people I speak with, I fervently believe in their mission. So it was great to be number 2 on this podcast. It's been really fun talking to people, and I look forward to seeing, where the next 100 go. Denise, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rob. You were number 3.
Yeah. So I connected with the folks from the Think Small podcast about a year ago now, and I just really appreciated the way that they engage small and mid-sized business leaders in a platform that they can talk about their journey, right? And give them kind of an avenue to talk about, well, not everything's perfect in running a small business. We've made mistakes, and here are the mistakes I've made. So it's been really uplifting to hear people kind of airing out their mistakes and their problems and challenges they've had in running a small business, and realizing that it's good to sometimes get that out, and it's good to listen to other people who have had those same challenges. And I'm intrigued every day by the people I get to speak to on this podcast.
How about you, Denise?
Yeah, so Rob's enthusiasm for the work he was doing on the Think Small podcast sort of wore off on me, and he said, hey, you should come check out what I'm doing. And I just love this platform because at heart, I'm a storyteller, right? And I love hearing all of the stories from the founders, owners, entrepreneurs. Small business drives the economy in the United States. And so hearing what's really happening in the trenches, and these are just raw, honest conversations sometimes about, things that have happened. And, I've had many people tell me, gosh, we've almost approached bankruptcy on multiple occasions. And I think that's news to maybe some people who are doing it alone, and they feel like, gosh, why is this so hard, right? But it's really a common thing that founders stumble, and it's just where you are in your growth journey. It's nobody's fault. It's not because, you know, you made a wrong turn. It's just, this is hard. To build a business from scratch is hard. And so I really appreciate just getting to know the podcast guests, hearing what they're working up against. And it's just been some amazing technology, you know, some fun quips that I've heard from people. Like, I had a packaging company, and, you know, they keep fluids out of packages. So his word was, "We're freaks about leaks." I had another podcast guest tell me real estate is a sport. It takes money to make money, right? And so just all these great ways of framing challenges, I think, helps me sort of keep my pulse on the market in terms of what's happening in small business, so that I can be a helpful connector to other people.
Yeah, that's so important, Denise. Thank you for that. So what makes, I mean, I think the answer is going to be different for each of us, but what makes a podcast guest a good podcast guest?
Personally, I really don't like doing too much talking on these. Like, I love a guest that when they hop on and their charisma and like magnetism is just there, and I ask them like one question and they go, you know, I love that, because like, you know, as much as it's, you know, like our podcast, it's really an opportunity for the guest to show off, right? It's like, hey, like, tell me everything. And I love when I don't have to work too hard for them to really get into some really cool topics and to share. Some of the more challenging ones are ones where I like pop on and they're kind of skeptical. They're like, oh, I don't really know how much to share, or they've got something like a new product that they're keeping close to their chest that they don't want to necessarily get into nitty gritty on. And so I found that my best guests were people that were like open books.
Yeah, similar. When guests are authentic and they're not doing it just for the money, it makes it much more enjoyable, because you could see them just light up from the inside, right? And they're not trying to sell you anything. They're just trying to convey what it is that keeps their motor going. Those are conversations I enjoy too. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, Alex, I totally agree with what you were saying. The more active and animated the conversations are, then that's, I think, where we get the best out of a podcast episode. Also, the more vulnerable someone can be in talking about their business journey, it also makes for just amazing content and a real ability for us to connect with our guests, you know, on a deeper level. And honestly, I just love the stories. I spoke to a CEO of a business who literally, Denise, you spoke about, you know, facing bankruptcy. This person literally had businesses collapse twice in his career, none of which were his fault, but it's a really hard thing to go through, and have not only to lift yourself up and to start something new, but having to do it twice is just amazing. And all those businesses have been successful, but they've collapsed for one reason or another. I remember his story was, one of them, he actually sold a business and the buyer never came through with the cash. So not only did he no longer have his business, but he didn't have the money after trying to sell it. So some of those conversations are the ones I love.
Yeah, I find that, you know, it's been so amazing to watch how reflective some of these folks have been, because maybe in their day-to-day world, they don't take the time to do that. And by digging into their story and prompting them to remember certain things, they really appreciate that time that we've given them, you know, to be reflective about what were the hard things that got you to where you are, and what would you tell our listeners about how to avoid some of that pain that you had to go through. So I think those stories are just great. And just to hear the passion, I mean, this solidifies it for me that people like to talk about themselves, right? And so when you get them going about something that they're passionate about, and then you get to hear those little nuances that maybe they haven't shared with the world, right? But are really keys to their success.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, in the people that I've spoken with, there's always a common theme. And in the creative world, there's an element of therapy that you're providing your clients, where, you know, when talking about branding and talking about growth, it's like helping them get out of their way and what their original idea was when they first started the business to where they now need to go. So what's going to get you there isn't what got you here, is a theory. And over as I'm talking to them, the element of therapy is there, yes, but then there's the element of what really matters. So what are you noticing that really matters to your, not, I don't want to say clients, to your guests on the podcast?
I would say just the grit, right? I mean, a lot, as we've all said, a lot of these business owners have been through hard things, and they don't give up. And I've had them literally say that on the podcast, right? Don't give up. Things are going to go sideways, so just brace yourself and keep going. And for some of these folks, I mean, they've been at it for 10 years and they're still not at a point of revenue or growth or market penetration that they had hoped to achieve when they first started out, but they're still going, right? And they're finding a way. And so I love hearing about the grittiness that it takes to really succeed.
Yeah.
Monica, in some of the conversations I've had in answer to that question, it's most people are getting into business not to get rich, right? They're getting into business to build something organic. But I can't tell you how many business leaders and CEOs I've spoken with that are there to, they're creating their business for their employees. They want to build up an environment where to keep people employed, to allow them to grow, and to get those people into places in their careers that they never thought possible too. So I'm energized by the people who are creating businesses to build something better and not just for themselves.
Yeah. Over's giving.
One of the things I noticed that there are almost like two different types of people that end up on the podcast. And one is the person that, like, the marketing team lined up the interview and they're like, oh, like, I just feel like it's something that I needed to develop, is this sort of online presence and diversifying my marketing strategy, but they're almost like reluctant to it. And then you have the retired salesperson that, became a business owner, but still loves that, that art of the sale, or like getting in front of somebody or talking or networking. Right. So I thought that was unique was like the different personality types that end up on our podcast. It's like somebody that's like, oh, like, I know that I should be doing this, but it's not something I regularly do. And then you have that one person that pops on that's like, I love doing this. I love for it. Like, I'll always hash out 30 minutes to, network and talk with somebody new. Like, kind of cool.
Yeah, it is definitely a little bit like networking as we're talking to these people. And I just want to point out that there are the likelihood of surviving 1 year of business entrepreneurship. It's like 82% survive their first year, and then it goes down from there. So if you've reached year 5, it's around 60% that you're still around, and year 9 and 10, you're 30% chance that you're still around. But 99.9% of all US companies are small businesses. It's that 0.01% that are like the Amazons and the Fords, right? And you can't always get there overnight, nor should you. What are you finding in your own business, or the way you operate within the business that you work for? What does business growth look like to you?
Yeah, I can kind of chime in on this one. So, as you all know, I'm an employee benefits producer. And so I'm in a unique position because oftentimes employee benefits or health insurance is the second largest line item for a business, right? And then there's a responsibility from the employer's perspective that once they start offering health insurance, they're tied to the health and wellness of not only their employees, but the families of those employees, right? So like that weight, that it becomes such a burden, right? Like an employer related burden. And so when I think about growth, the question is, from the benefit side of things, is like, are you offering benefits to attract and retain talent and, get people in and keep them there? Because we know that benefits are probably the second or third significant reason why an employee stays at a job. Even for like a pay neutral move, you're more likely to stay at a job if the benefits are rich, right? So from that perspective, it's like, and then you have a sliding scale where it's like, all right, rise in healthcare costs, rise in insurance costs, and then how do I make sure that my employees are, the education of my employees is being translated, that they know that we're investing in them. So it's such a balancing act whenever I talk with my clients, right? Because we know that, health insurance is continuing to go up and more employers are putting it under review. So how do we mitigate and close and lower those costs? It's always a tough conversation. So that's just where I'm at from a business growth perspective. We look at it as like employee retention and attracting top talent, and how can you make sure that you're translating the value of the benefit to the employee, and then what that employee means to you from like a productivity perspective along the course of a year. Like if you lose an employee, what does that mean for you, right? Was it worth it to like cut the benefits if you lost 20% of your staff, right?
Usually no, but it sounds like
Yeah.
as your clients grow, you're able to grow, and it seems like an organic. I'm just envisioning a dahlia when there's a contraction and then expansion, contraction and expansion, and you're along for the ride with your clients.
I feel like I catch my clients in two different places. One, I'm catching them at like, all right, we're ready to grow. And then I'm helping them grow. And then, or I catch them on the way down, right? So they're like, hey, like I've had crazy increases. Please help me. I'm bleeding. I need to triage this. And then we fix it. But they all almost always end up going downwards, right? And then from the growth perspective, I'll catch them on the way up too, right? We'll catch like startups or emerging market, companies and say, all right, these are the 9 things that you should have in place, and this is the best picture that we can kind of paint. Those are my two my two clients, really.
Perfect.
Alex, thanks, Monica. Alex, we kind of feel the same way. I say we because Denise and I, as you know, work for the same firm, and we help businesses, small and mid-sized businesses, accelerate their growth. And sometimes we do catch them when they're in a contractionary period, and they come to us when they just don't realize, or they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know what methods and processes it takes to, make that graph go up and to the right rather than, down and to the right. But it's been amazing in this podcast to grasp some of the things that our CEO guests, our business leader guests have done without even realizing why they were doing it or what they have done. One of my guests in the evolution of his business literally made the decision to exit about 40 to 50% of his business because he realized it wasn't the strategic place to be. Most of his resources were going to a part of his business was the least profitable. And he made the very hard decision to contract his business purposefully in order so it could grow in the long term more profitably. And that was a very difficult decision for that person to make, but it was the right one.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with chambers of commerce, and that's been a bit eye-opening for me, just in terms of some business operate internationally, some nationally, right? But a lot of them are operating in kind of their hometown market. And if you're not engaged with your local chamber of commerce, you're missing out on a number of resources that many of these towns, cities have made available to small business owners. Everything from AI classes to leadership development to small business loans. And it's also a great place to connect with like-minded leaders who are trying to grow in your same area, right? And so community is a strategy, and going hyper local is a strategy for some businesses. And there's a lot to tap into. Even I interviewed one woman who runs a federally qualified healthcare center. And these are great opportunities for people who, don't have enough insurance to cover things, as you were talking about, Alex, from an employee benefits. But she gave an example where a patient ended up with a rare diagnosis, and the medication was going to cost $1,800. And that patient was able to switch providers to the federally qualified healthcare center, and it brought it down to $480. And so really knowing what's in your zip code and how to leverage those resources for your employees, I think, is a great strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much business to be had at chambers of commerces. They the phrase "it takes a village," right? And why can't it be my village? Why can't we start local and hyper local in that capacity? And granted, not all businesses can do this, and neither should they if it's not part of their growth plan and their business plan. But the next question I have is around AI. Obviously, you can't open social media or LinkedIn or see an email without the words AI in it these days as a small business owner. So I'm curious for all of us, what has it done for your business and what has it done to your business? And for me, what it's done for my business is make it easier to do analysis, whether it's notes from a call or data that I'm looking at, like bigger, larger sets of data. I will say, as a content marketer, I am against at the moment the way things are for an AI to write content for human consumption. I think it's good for synthesizing. I think it's good for giving perspective. I don't think it's good as the end all be all. And I've had conversations with small businesses where they say they use AI for all of their content, and then they schedule it out using an AI bot for that, which is also not advisable because these platforms earn their money from having advertising dollars, and those dollars come from your eyeballs. So all those things combined, yes, it's great. It's going to shake things up, and people need a little shaking every now and then. And I think that they're the human touch cannot or should not be replaced by anything artificial. Where do you stand on that? On what's done for your business and what it's done to your business, Rob?
I'm glad you asked that, Monica. And I'm going to answer specifically on behalf of the guests that I've had on the podcast, because I think I got through about 10 or 15 recorded episodes when it kind of just hit me like a freight train. Everybody's talking about AI, but the news that I'm getting from my small and mid-sized business leader guests is very different than what we're hearing in national news about what AI is doing to specifically employment levels. Everybody I'm talking who's leading a small and mid-sized business uses AI so they can get more efficient, more productive, and specifically have more human time to deal with their employees and their clients. And one of the most kind of in my face examples of this was I was speaking to a managed service provider, right? An IT solutions provider that specifically implemented AI tools into his client's business. He said specifically, I'm using AI to get more human. It's opening up so much more available time for me to have a more human contact with my clients. And I just thought, how ironic is that? But how beautiful is that? Nobody I speak to on this podcast is looking at AI as a headcount reduction tool.
Right.
I think there's a lot of hype around AI. We're in that hype cycle still,
For sure, Denise.
People are dabbling, people are trying out the new tool. And these are all point solutions that don't all come together to work in your favor, right? And so that's what I've been seeing out there. And it's just like when Excel came on the marketplace, everybody thought accountants were going to go out of business because now you had tools that could do what accountants do. No, the accounting profession actually bloomed because now they had a tool to do the math, but they had more time to do the services and the human touch and the relationship building, with all of their clients. And so we're going to see that same thing with AI. I had one Chamber of Commerce woman who she's a 59-year-old grandmother, and she teaches an AI course in Georgia for 300 women, which is a women's Chamber of Commerce for that particular county. And her statement, which stuck with me, was AI is going to change the middle class because she believes it's the great equalizer. And so, I think it all depends on the right use of AI, obviously data protection that everybody's concerned about, and then really building a sustainable operating model, and not just using point solutions to do random things.
It's interesting. There are very different views on AI depending on who you are when you're talking to them. And Rob, it was something you said, I think, where they're not looking to replace headcount with it. There's some people I've spoken to that do want to replace headcount with it, which, yes, they can be reskilled and do something different. And at the same time, there will be jobs that will be lost across the country and across the world, right? Because it's just everything's going to be automated in such a way. And so I'm wondering if the equalization process that Denise was talking about is going to equalize the lower middle class to the middle class, or the middle class to the higher class, and what that equalization actually looks like, because it's so disparate across as a business owner, AI is great. As a business employee, it's questionable. To people I spoke to. How about you?
I was at a entrepreneurial conference at one point, maybe a few months ago, and one of the speakers had said, and I love this quote. They said, "Success comes to those that can make decisions quickly." And he highlights and goes on about how it doesn't necessarily have to be the right decision. Hopefully, it's the right decision, but if you can make decisions quickly, you can pivot and kind of go in a direction with confidence, right? And I think that that's what the underlying theme for AI has been around for me, right? People are like, oh, like I'll use it for email writing, and it's like, well, you're just making it, you're prompting it with to make the most accurate description of what you're trying to say, right? And the same thing goes with, like, for me with data analytics, or with, when we're looking at benefit packages, some of them can be exceptionally complex. So you're like, hey, help me make a decision about what would be the best fit for my client. And I think that the overarching theme for my podcast guests has been they're using it to make decisions quickly, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think one thing that that nobody is ignoring, at least in the discussions I'm having, both in my business and with my podcast guests, are that we can't run from it, right? AI is here. And as one of my guests put it, AI is not going to displace our people. People that know AI are going to displace our people. So let's get our people, educated and up to speed on what problems they can solve using AI tools. And again, I didn't start with what AI tools to use, because that's where a lot of people want to go, right, everybody? But building up their own workforce to be smarter and more productive and more efficient through AI, I think, is the way things are all going to flush out.
I'll drop one more line as well. I think that, when we think about AI, there was one guy that I had on the podcast, and he goes, we almost have two concepts in, where the long run it goes. It's like, do we have the Wall-E outcome where everyone's fat and no one has to work? Or do we have the Terminator outcome where the robots turn against us, right? And he goes, and I don't think it's either of those. I think it's somewhere in the middle, where life we end up being sort of like working, it integrated in our daily lives. And I think that's so true, because when you look at small businesses, there are a lot of businesses out there that are still heavily reliant on paper, right? So, as much as there's like, oh, a digital push, there's still businesses out there that run on paper that have, massive filing cabinets, right? So, like, we could say AI is coming for jobs, but ultimately there are businesses that will have zero AI for a very long time. And we'll be looking at them in 20 years like, hey, you don't even use AI?
Hopefully we'll be here in that much time.
I've talked to some lawyers who, say it's a bit disruptive, because just like patients who show up to their doctor visit with all the WebMD citations and their self-diagnosis, that's happening in law as well. They're writing their own contracts and they're saying, see, isn't it good? We're done. And it's like, no, that's why you go to a law firm, because there is human discernment that, might save you from losing a lot of money because you didn't do it the right way. So those are some disruptors, right, that are happening in businesses as well from AI. But this is why I say we're still in the hype cycle.
Yeah. Denise, I think you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head with the word discernment. And that is, you need those professionals like a lawyer or a human doctor or a service professional or an IT professional to give you advice based on your business, and the discernment to know, and the experience to know what is the right approach and what is the wrong approach in certain areas of business. Human discernment, I don't think, will ever go away.
Our consciousness is important in making decisions, for sure.
I will say
100%.
On social media, I keep seeing posts about, oh, the doctors of the future are using ChatGPT to write their papers. So make sure you get your vitamins in and get your exercise, because but
all right, just to switch gears for a little bit. So this is our 100th episode that we're recording, and maybe we'll film the 200th or 250th, whatever we're feeling when the time comes, which I think it's going to be before the end of the year, because to get to the first 30 podcasts, I think it took 5 or 6 months. And then to get to the next 70, it took 2 months with all our powers combined. So where do we see Think Small podcast going?
Wow, that's a heck of a question. I think it's going to evolve into a couple different avenues. One is, and I've actually already started doing some of this work, is hearing a concern or a problem or an area for improvement on one business and realizing, hey, I've already chatted with another business leader in another business that could solve that problem. I'm already making offline introductions of 2 of my different podcast guests that can either one can help the other or they can help each other. So I think this is going to become a bigger, broader, networking kind of opportunity sharing environment. I also don't see the speed of this slowing down anytime. To your point, Monica, I think we're going to get to our 200th episode by the end of summer.
Okay.
I really feel that way because so many people just want to tell their stories and are thrilled that this platform exists for them to tell their stories.
I think we're going to call you Rob the Rolodex Godlewski.
I hope so.
How about you, Denise? Where do you see Think Small podcast going?
I think we're seeing some aggregation around certain industries, right? We've had a lot of sort of healthcare guests. We've had a lot of law firms. We've had the chambers. We've had, different types of verticals. So maybe we get tighter relationships between people who are in those industries, right? Because everyone knows it's lonely at the top as a CEO, and to be able to have a community of folks that you can reach out to because they've gone through the same thing that you've gone through creates more of that relationship, that relational knowledge transfer, if you will. Because I've had a lot of people say, oh, make sure you have a mentor, make sure you have, somebody you can talk to about, and there's a lot of peer advisory groups out there and things of that nature. But I think it would be great if we can build that community within the Think Small podcast and people can find their people based on their industry.
That's great. I mean, they can look at previous episodes. We have them numbered and named. We don't yet have them sequenced according to industry, but that might be the next step.
Yeah.
I think Think Small podcast, end of summer is going to be aggressive to get to 200, but I like it. I like it. I know how many we have in the queue already, so why not?
It's our BHAG, Monica.
Yeah.
Our big, very audacious goal.
And that's perfect. I think the podcast is, it's just going to keep expanding. We're going to add more people to the team in the coming months to have additional interesting conversations with people in their networks. And I think as we build the buzz, we'll have people approaching us for conversations more than we're approaching them. Alex, what do you think?
It's such a great question, because if you had told me a year ago when this started that we'd have 12,000 subscribers amongst all of our major platforms and there'd be 6 different guests or 6 different hosts and we'd be at our 100th episode, I'd say, no way. And so to ask me, where do you see the podcast going in the next, 6 to 8 months? I would say I have no idea. I'm excited to see it though.
Okay. And I think the next question, there's 2 more questions I have queued up for us, but I think the next question is, what's stopping you?
I love that only because we asked that of all of our podcast guests, and those answers are as broad as the day is long.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think anything is stopping us. I think the model we have at the Think Small podcast for guest outreach is one of the most robust I've ever seen. So I don't think that this model is going to stop anytime soon. I do agree that it's going to evolve into maybe some different avenues and different areas of focus. I think we could potentially branch off in some industry specific areas. But I don't think anything's stopping us from doing this. I think it's just it's a great avenue. I love connecting with people anyways. I do it for my day job. So this is just a natural extension of that. And I don't think anything is stopping us.
Besides hours in a day.
Well, that's true.
I was just going to say, Monica, I was just literally going to say that from the what's stopping me, what originally was timing, was like, all of the meetings that we were taking on in the beginning, it was overwhelming. And then to bring in extra hosts and kind of spread out the wealth of guests has made it more enjoyable, because now it's maybe I have 2 or 3 guests per week instead of 20.
And we are discerning with the people that we speak to. We have a call ahead of time to make sure they're screened and they would be a good guest, right? So the episodes that our listeners hear are what we are deeming the best of the best, right? And for me, it's maybe 60% make it to a recording phase. Denise, what are your thoughts? What's holding us back?
Gosh, I don't know. It's the same challenge that we're talking to our podcast guests about, is when you've got too much demand, what do? Right. And it's like, you figure it out, whether that means more guests. I know there's some coming on, whether it means adding some different platforms to be able to spread out the interest. And, we're also starting to put some marketing behind this. Before we had any volume, we weren't actively out there promoting the show. We were doing our best to find those guests that wanted to be in that top 100. And now that we've got some volume behind us, we're starting to do more of the marketing. And so I think that's just going to lead to more guests wanting to come onto the podcast. And so I think keeping our quality where it is, so that we have really great stories and really great pieces of wisdom that can be utilized by our listeners, will keep the show going and moving and quickly. It's just a matter of handling that volume. So it's a good problem to have. I don't have the answer yet.
No, you don't have to have the answer. It's just a curiosity. So my last question is if there's any specific company or person you'd like to interview to bring on the Think Small podcast. And it doesn't have to be a small company. I'm saying the world is your oyster.
Wow, I think you might have stumped us with that question, Monica. That opens it up a lot.
All of your faces, I see the hamster wheels just furiously going.
Well, I'll tell you one that I did have that I really enjoyed. He is the president of United Healthcare for the South and Central Texas area. So again, not a small company. United Healthcare is the largest health benefits employer, right? But that whole market and industry right now is going through some scrutiny. People are non-trusting of it. There's been a lot of things that have happened, but it was great to have him on to talk about what are some of the things that United Healthcare is doing to improve, the prior authorization rate that everybody complains about, right? And using AI to give better patient experiences so that you don't have to wait for so long, or you can find that provider that maybe you don't know how to search for. So I think, having some of the bigger companies like that, now granted he was for a region, but that should be really of keen interest, I think, to our listening audience, because they all have to go out and buy employee benefits, right? And so are they going to choose United Healthcare, or are they going to choose somebody else? And so I think it's helpful for us to get that big company perspective, even if it's at a regional level.
Perfect. So Alex, if you could have anybody on the podcast or any company, who would it be?
I think that it's an exciting time for the Think Small podcast to potentially swim up to the mid-market stream, right? I think that we've had a lot of stories around the small business, and that's the foundation of the podcast. But I would love to, I think Denise mentioned about interviewing some of the larger companies. United Healthcare is a behemoth. I'd be happy to interview companies that have, the 50 to 250 employees, and kind of learn a little bit more about some of their problems, some of their goals, what they're seeing in the markets, and then having that sort of mid-market, almost like think mid-market, think, I don't know, like a division of the podcast that handles, like those emerging middle market type companies.
Perfect. And Rob, same question to you. And is there any specific company or person you would like to interview?
So Monica, I can't give you a specific company name or person's name, but the type of company I would really love to engage with and dig into are those that offer disruptive business models. I've always been intrigued by ideas and creations and businesses that completely upend either some other product, some other distribution channel, some other process or method of the way a certain customer group consumes a product or service. So those companies that truly have a completely disruptive business model and totally differentiated from any other product or service in their space. Those are the people that really energize me.
Okay. I think if I had to answer it, because I did ask it, I should answer it, is the Tory Burch Foundation. And speaking to Tory Burch would be incredible. She's, in my opinion, such a empowering individual for women's empowerment. And she seems to practice what she preaches, which is important as a leader, because sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do. And I really respect her and what she's building with that, not just her fashion line, but what is going to be her legacy long after the fashion fades, right? And I think that she's a really nice role model for me to look at too, in that capacity of what will remain after I am gone, after MD Inc. is gone. And it gets me thinking. So I would love to interview anybody that's a part of that.
Yeah, it's a great question, because some of the owners and founders I talk to, when you ask them questions around, why are you building this company? Is it to create generational wealth for your kids? Is it to leave something lasting in the world that makes people's lives better, right? It's a question that stumps them sometimes, right?
Yeah.
They might have had one mission kind of going into it, but things change the longer you're in the business and you see kind of what's happening. So it's an important thing to think about.
And boomers are the largest amount of small businesses in America at the moment. So it's interesting to think that they might have been doing this for 30 years and, change. What's changed? Because it's been working fine so far, right? Does anybody have anything else they want to add for our audience before we wrap this up?
Just that I wrote a blog article, I'll be putting it out on our website, called 30 Conversations in 5 Weeks. So that was the number of CEOs and business owners that I was able to speak to. And I sort of distilled down kind of the top 5 takeaways of things that I heard, problems that they're solving, things that they're building, and maybe some innovative approaches to rethink what you're doing based on the wisdom of some of these leaders.
Fantastic. How about you, Rob?
Thanks, Monica. Another topic or realization I had when speaking to so many of these small and mid-sized business CEOs and business leaders is a common focus on don't try to go this alone, right? Have professional mentors, have coaches, have advisors, have a network of people you can lean on. To help you go through this journey of leading a small business. And I've had so many guests that have commented on that. And I want to refer back to actually one of my past clients said, pretty much the same thing. He said, Rob, I appreciate you being here because I can't have these conversations with anybody else in my company. And I've heard that in not so many words from a lot of our guests. So find that professional network of advisors, coaches, mentors, and do not try to go this alone.
That is really sound advice. Alex, do you have any last minute thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I guess I want to express like gratuity, right? Like I'm so grateful for the opportunity and for where the Think Small podcast came, how it's grown, for you all, for all your time and expertise that you've brought to the table, for all of the coordinators and marketers and editors, and for Rachel, and for everybody at the Think Small podcast, that all of the hands and for our weekly meetings and all the prep calls, all the time that was spent on it. It's a very cool opportunity and a very unique place to be a part of. So I'm so glad that I am part of the Think Small podcast and for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, you took what I was going to say, Alex. I am so thrilled to be here. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get here. I was so averse to being on Zoom and doing all these things again, and seeing what happens and how the sausage is made behind the scenes just makes me respect what we're doing so much more, and the people that are helping us do it. And the conversations, the guests, the people who don't make it to the podcast round, but we still get to talk to, it's all part of it. It's all a learning. It's a lesson. There's something in it at all aspects of it. And I am grateful as well. So I would like to also direct our audience to the Think Small podcast website. We have blogs there. We have previous episodes on both Apple and Spotify. You can fill out the form if you want to be a guest. If you have any questions, you can interact with us on all of the platforms. I also want to thank Denise, Rob, and Alex for making the time today to be on this podcast, our 100th episode. It's been super fun along the way, and I am really excited to see where this goes. So thank you all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
Julie.
Definitely our pleasure, everybody. It's been a great experience.
Yeah. Onward to the next 100.
Absolutely.
And beyond.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?